Good evening, and welcome to Virtual First Friday at the Custom House Maritime Museum, where we explore our history through presentation and social interaction. Tonight we welcome ship model builder Rob Napier. For nearly 50 years, Rob has worked as a craftsman in his art, creating original models grounded in historical, photographic, and artistic documentation for which he has received both regional and national recognition. In that time, and presently, he also engages in conservation work on historical ship models in the collections of public cultural institutions as well as private collectors. He has worked with models in the collections of the Forbes Collection, the Kennedy Library, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the New York Yacht Club, the Art Gallery of Ontario, and the Custom House Maritime Museum here in Newburyport. This event will be an opportunity for viewers to interact directly with Rob and ask questions in order to learn about the process of maintaining and preserving these historical maritime artifacts. Before we begin, our Executive Director Joan Whitlow has a few brief announcements. Thank you all for joining us this evening.
My name is Joan Whitlow, and I am the Executive Director here at the Custom House Maritime Museum. And I just wanted to start off the evening by welcoming everybody to the November 1st Friday and to give a quick little update before we begin our program. I wanted to first start with the annual appeal. That was mailed out to all of the members, and so far we have received $13,000 to date. The appeal was targeted for the last two sort of holes of the building, if you will, the doors, the front door and the back door. The front door is one of the original Robert Mills architectural elements that remains in the building. But if you've ever been in the inside with the doors locked, which is quite common today with the events that are unfolding, we've noticed that the wind is constantly pushing on the interior doors, and that the first floor, now that we're monitoring the environment, is actually a lot colder. And there's a lot of leakage, not only for losing heat, but also bringing in outside elements and not very good for the protection of the collections. The rear doors are also from the 1970s when the building was renovated, but they're just commercial metal doors that are really seeing their age. And our architect, Greg Colling, has been working on trying to design a historic interpretation of the doors with actually balancing today's codes and guidelines for evacuation and so forth. So it is a bit of a balance, and we expect to go forward with the program this winter. And what we're going to do is have to remove both doors simultaneously, temporary. So when you see temporary doors on the building, you know that work is underway. And that's sort of the driving force of the annual appeal. There's still time to give, always, and I really am excited about this project to, finish tightening the security of the environment as well as the protecting the collections. The other initiative that I wanted to mention is actually going to be introduced by Susan Bernhard. She is our chair. She's been working very hard with the board to bring about the Custom House Maritime Tree. So Susan?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to November's First Friday. Before Joan introduces Rob Napier, I wanted to take a few minutes. First of all, thank you for all the support for the annual fund. We're really excited. I mean, can you imagine that 1835 door that still exists in a wooden door that we have a chance to refurbish and make awesome, and with new locks? I mean, we're just excited about this plan. So we're kicking off. The Custom House has been busy. You all know this. We've been out in the forefront trying to drum up the community. But what we haven't been able to do is do a lot of fundraising. And we wanted to take the time to say, what can we do for the community as well as the museum? And one of our board directors, Elizabeth Lorraine, came up with this great idea. Like, why don't we think about what they do in Gloucester and with the lobster tree and light it up and make it a community event? So we said, okay, what do we have? We don't want lobster pots. Well, we have the Coast Guard. And what we thought was, how do we incorporate a life ring into a tree and light it up during the holidays, whenever we need it to keep the beacon alive here in Newburyport. So what we did was, this is the best part. The team went out, we asked all the nonprofits, come join us, be part of this. We are going to construct a 30-foot rope tree in the back. We're going to light it up for the month of December. And we're asking people to come down and buy a life ring. For the smaller ones at $10, $25. And then the bigger ones at $100. Sean, do you think you can put on the logo just for a visual for us? And what we're going to do is we have taken 360 rings, and the students of the Bresnahan School have been sponsored by Finneran and Nicholson, and they are decorating these as an art project. And this is literally, we are taking ropes as garland and connecting the businesses, the students, the residents, the members, and we are connecting them on this tree, and we're asking you to decorate them. You can either put your name on it, put a ribbon on it, or do something elaborate. As someone's just mentioned, they may put solar lights on it today, right? I have another person that's doing candy canes, and the businesses are going to put their logos on it. But what this is doing is trying to connect the community, tie them together figuratively and literally, and give a platform for the Custom House and give a platform for the nonprofits. At this point, we have a number of nonprofits joining us, and they are the Museum of Old Newbury. Oh my goodness, it's awesome. They're taking their Herald and they are doing a reproduction, and it's going to be the tree topper. And that tree topper can be used as a garden adornment, and they're auctioning it off. Lowe's Boathouse, I think many of you know, has already done a capital campaign. They're saying we're good right now, but they want to support us. They're going to put a dory right near it. And so if people want to take pictures and do family pictures in the back, it's going to be lit up. It's going to be great. We would love to have major events down there, but because of COVID, we don't know what's going to happen. But the tree's going to be lit. We're going to hope people come by and spot it, but come by, throw a life ring at us, ring in the holidays. And we'll be selling them in front of the Custom House this weekend, noon to 4. And also online, you can buy it. You can arrange to get it back after we shut down the tree after the new year. If you have any questions, go to the website and buy it at buyalifering.com. Thank you all so much for your time. Enjoy Rob. He's awesome. I mean, he's amazing. So thanks again, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Susan. So I wanted to just start a few moments to just say that throughout my career, I seldom meet people where I feel like their reputation precedes them in a good way. And Rob is one of those professionals that I've been very fortunate to have met many years ago. I was working at the MIT Museum, and the Hart Nautical curator, Kurt Hasselbach, who recently retired, always said to me, "Oh, I have a loan going out. I have a ship model. It needs to be fixed. The rigging is a mess, or it needs to be cleaned. It needs to be packed. I need some advice." We're very fortunate that we have this gentleman on the North Shore, and I'm going to bring him in. You don't need to worry about anything, but we're going to bring him in. So I pretty much just sort of took a back seat for a number of years, seeing Rob in the hallways or saying hello to him over coffee in the staff rooms, but seldom did I work with him directly until about 2017. We acquired a bequest, actually, about short of a dozen models, very large historic models, some of them 8 to 10 feet long, that are not only a ship model, but then encased in a historic case. And they needed to be shipped from California. And I was thrown into the dialogue very quickly, got everything packed up and shipped. And when they arrived, Kurt and I assessed everything. We took photographs, we wrote up a report, we presented it to Rob. And then Rob sort of gave me an idea of what he wanted to do, what his plan of attack was. because he was very systematic on how he was going to do this. And I had to always get a step ahead of him. I always had to make sure that he wasn't wasting any time, because he really wanted to do something like a model speed dating, is the only thing I can say. And that was to just get the models prepared and have them set up on 3 or 4 tables so that he could just come in and do all the models at once. And I am always really find this exciting part of my job, because I have the ability to ask questions that sometimes normal people can't ask. Like, Rob, how did you get into this? And how did you learn this? And why are you doing it to begin with? I mean, it's meticulous, detailed work. And I hope, and I want Rob to turn on his video and begin his audio so he can begin to tell you a little bit about what I've learned from him. Are you there, Rob?
I am. Are you here?
I'm here.
Okay. I think we're all here.
Your picture is there? I guess we got a lot of people here.
It looks like we have quite a few people. Yep. And let me see. I'm going to go on this. So I guess I can carry on.
Yes, please do.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you here at the Custom House, sort of. We're not all really here. I'm Rob Napier. I'm a ship model guy, and I'm going to give you a little talk tonight about my life in ship modeling. And when we get done, there'll be a Q&A. I think that the idea is if you have questions that you want to ask, please don't try to interrupt my talk. Joan will field the questions and save them, and we'll all get together when I finish. So now I'm going to share screen and start the PowerPoint. And here we go. So I'm hoping everybody can see this. This is a talk called A Life in Ship Models. It's altered from a similar talk that I prepared and delivered about a year ago. This talk here has been expanded for the Custom House tonight, and it's basically the title basically says what it is, and so we'll just get going here. One of the things that I sort of encourage people to do is to ask, what is a ship model? It seems obvious to all of us. We live in a maritime community. I know that there are other ship model people tuned into this, that they think, okay, a ship model is a representation of a ship or a boat. And you walk into a room, though, and you see a ship model on a shelf or in a glass case on the other side of the room. And I hope that the ship model speaks as an invitation to look more closely at it as an object. It's doing its job if it seduces you to come across the room and look more closely at it to find out what its story is about the vessel it represents, or about the model building itself, or just the presentation that you see there. And we don't think of inanimate objects as being, issuing invitations, but that's how I think of ship models. They call to me, and I go look at them. Another aspect is, how do we define a high quality ship model? I'm sure that all of you out there tonight have heard the phrase museum quality. I want you to register that phrase in your mind and delete it from your vocabulary. It is of no value to museums. It is only of value to retailers who want to try and convince an unsuspecting public that what they have for sale is high quality. The only thing that's high quality to a museum is an object that, regardless of how it's made, that furthers the stated mission of the museum. If it isn't doing that, it has no quality or use to a museum. So don't use this expression when you're describing anything to anybody. It's empty. When you go into a museum and you see an exhibition of art, you might look at a painting by Claude Monet, and on the information on the wall, it says what it is, and it'll say it's an oil on canvas or an oil on a panel. Or if you look at a sculpture, it might say it's bronze, or something might be wood. If you look at a ship model in a museum and it's trying to list the different aspects that it is, or that it embodies, you would have to come up with more of a description. And we like to say, I think that a ship model is hyper-representational because it actually represents a single ship. It's trying to do it as closely and as accurately as it can. It's polychromed because it has many colors. You can see in this model here, there's orange and black and gold and white. It's a polychromed object. It's multimedia because it's made out of wood and brass and linen and silk, two little itty bitty pieces of plastic and some gold. So it's multimedia, and it's sculpture because it's three-dimensional, and there's no denying the sculpture-like quality of most of the individual parts that are in the model, especially the orange wood, natural wood parts in the bottom of that, each of one of which is sculpted. A friend of mine and I tried a long time ago to figure out how to replace the phrase that I just asked you to forget. And we came up with something that was a little bit more cumbersome, but a fine scale ship model. And we're talking about fine scale ship models tonight, not toy boats, not models made for scientific and testing purposes, and not models to go operate in the water. We're talking about static, fine scale models. So a high quality fine scale model yields a compelling impression of an actual vessel within the constraints of historical accuracy. This is a mouthful, I agree, but it says what we needed it to say. And I offer a course every winter for the USS Constitution Model Shipwright Guild in for judging their seminar that's put on for to help judges who will be judging our ship model contest. And we spend 2 or 3 hours taking apart this description and talking about its subjective arm and its objective arm. And I don't have time to do that with you tonight, but trust us, that's the best definition we can give for what a high quality model is. What is my line of ship model work? Well, people say, what do you do? And my elevator speech, which is good for an elevator that's only going up maybe a floor or two, is I build and repair ship models for individuals and institutions. That's about it. Now I say this to people and they say, okay, I get the build and repair business, but what is it you do with chipmunks? I mean, I've actually had people ask me that. And so I have to restate things more clearly, but this is what I do. And most of the rest of this talk is going to be giving you some examples of building and repairing ship models for individuals and institutions. Joan said she likes to, ask about how I got started in this. Maybe I'll save details of that for Q&A, but the evidence is that I started very young. On the left is a picture of me in my cowboy shirt when I was 5, painting a toy Dory. Down below are 2 pictures of me taken more recently, working in my studio in Newburyport. I'm an autodidact. That means I taught myself how to do what I do. There are no schools in this country or anywhere else that I know of that teach fine scale ship modeling as a degree program, or even as a casual program or a course. I know there are courses offered in building half models that are basically geared towards amateurs who want to do it themselves. But there is no educational process for what I do. I've taught myself by doing, by reading, and by watching closely when I'm seeing other people work on ship models, which actually isn't all that often. For 47 years, I've been a career ship modeler. I have not ever had any other full-time job to which I've applied myself other than being in the Navy. This has been my whole job, my whole life. It did not develop as a hobby that I then decided to make a career later in life. One of the ways I've made my work change for me and grow is whenever a prospective client comes along and says, would you be interested in doing this sort of repair work or work on that collection of ship models or build a model of this vessel? My first answer is, yes, sure, I'll do it. And usually it works out, but sometimes it doesn't. And frequently saying yes was, not frequently, but occasionally saying yes was an incredibly naive thing to do, but I always learned. And that's how I got to where I am. What do I model? When I'm left to my own devices, if I'm building models for myself, which is rare because I do so much commission work, the things that I prefer to build models of are mid-19th century American merchant vessels. This means, it means basically vessels not intended for warfare. It would include merchant sailing vessels, yachts, pilot boats, some fishing schooners, mostly from New York, that were originally built mostly from New York to Maine, because that's where I've spent most of my life. And I don't focus, given my own head, I don't really focus on vessels intended to warfare. I like to contribute positively to the historical record by taking archival primary two-dimensional documents, like you see in this tableau photograph I made, that shows books and a builder's half model in the center. I don't know if you can see my cursor here. This is an early builder's half model of a sloop, or maybe a merchant sloop, or maybe a yacht. I like to work from archival photographs, which is great if you're working after the Civil War. Before the Civil War, not so many pictures exist. Here's a painting of a vessel I built a model of. Working with paintings is a wonderful experience. And I work with other documents, both 2- and 3-dimensional. But my thesis is a 3-dimensional document, which is a ship model. It comes out being a ship model, which stands as my amalgamation of the information that I've gathered about a particular vessel and its time and its business. That's what I like to do. And one of the things that I avoid is doing done-to-death subjects. If a client comes and says, I want a model of Flying Cloud, I say, no. I say, if you really want a nice ship model, we can find some other vessel that deserves to be modeled, that hasn't ever been modeled, and that where you're making a real contribution to the historic record, rather than just another vessel of just another model of a vessel that's been modeled a zillion times. Does that mean that Flying Cloud wasn't beautiful and isn't worth modeling? No, she was beautiful and is definitely worth modeling. But making models of her is not going to be doing much for the historic record, because almost all the research that can be done on a vessel like that has been done. Flying Cloud, USS Constitution, Charles W. Morgan, other high-profile vessels like that are hard to get involved with it to try and do anything new. There are two basic types of new models to build. One is a half-hull model and the other is full-hull models. These two models here are of the same vessel. Yankee economy sort of says, if we can define a whole concept of a ship by building a half of a model, Why build a whole model when half tells the whole story of the shape of the hull? And when I'm considering building a full hull model of a vessel, I almost always build a half model first in order to get involved with it, to see if I like it, to see how my research information is going to resolve, and just to see how it's going to be. In other words, the half model helps decide to take the plunge on whether or not or how to build a full hull model. A full hull model is a much, much bigger investment in time and other resources like research. The resource for materials isn't that great. There's just not a lot of physical material in even a complex ship model, but the time to fashion everything is huge. Back in the 1980s, a woman named Annie Dillard wrote a wonderful book of essays called Teaching a Stone to Talk. And in it, she was responding to somebody who had asked her to comment on the difference between having observed a partial eclipse of the sun and a total eclipse of the sun. And she responded that the difference was the difference between dating a man and marrying a man. And that's a lot the difference between building a half model and a full hull model. It takes about a week to fashion a half hull model, and it's fun, it's interesting, you learn a lot, but maybe you decide very quickly it's time to move on. You don't want to be invested in that vessel any longer. You've learned what you're going to learn about it. It was interesting, but you're going to move on. But when you get involved with building a full hull model of a vessel, you are tied up with it forever. It might take you 3 months or a year and a half to build a model. This particular one here is the 4 or 5 month project. And it might be delivered to its client and found itself in a home someplace. But for the rest of your life, every time you come across new information about this vessel, you will think about the model you built and about how that information jives with your interpretation as a model. So you never escape being involved with a vessel that you build a full hull model of. We'll look at a few half hull models. For those of you who are part of the Custom House and living here in Newburyport in general, know that what a builder's half model is. In the upper left is a builder's half model that belongs to the MIT Museum, and it's expanded to show how it was made. It's a bunch of layers of wood that were pegged together with tenons like you see at the bottom going up through the slots. You can see in the individual layers, which are called lifts. The layers, when they're all pegged together, are then carved to the shape of a prospective vessel by a shipbuilder or a ship designer. And then the layers are taken apart and measured, and those measurements are expanded by the scale of the vessel and drawn to be the plan of the vessel on a floor where the drawing is the size of the vessel. The interesting thing about this process is a vessel could be built from model to launching without using a single sheet of paper. I know this because I've done it with a small boat. And this type of model was, there's arguments about where it was invented and first used, but it's local. Some sources say the first one of these models was used here invented here in Newburyport in the 1790s. Others say it was invented in Salem, Massachusetts in the 1790s. Suffice it to say, Essex County is the home of this type of model, which was used everywhere shipbuilding was used in America for about 100 years. And it's still used sometimes today. When a model was done being used, it would be put together and maybe painted up or maybe mounted on a backboard, maybe some details added, and hung in an owner's home or in a shipbuilder's office to show the vessels with which they had been involved. And they're very collectible now. You've seen them at the Custom House. They're wonderful. And nowadays people build half models to be solely to document and commemorate yachts or vessels that already exist or have existed, and they're not used so much in the design process these days. The other three models here are models I built. The upper one is a Scottish steamboat. That model's about 8 inches long. The middle one is probably about 3 feet long. It's one of Donald Mackay's big clipper ships, the Lightning. This model was commissioned by the MIT Museum for a show they were doing on Mackay several years ago. And the bottom one is an interpretation of a Los Angeles class nuclear submarine, which looks a lot simpler than it was actually to make. And people say, "Oh, what is that?" And I glibly say, "Oh, it was easy to make. I just used Necco wafers." But the fact is it's ebony mounted on maple, and that model is about 15 inches long. Just so you know, I have built about 800 or 850 half models during my career so far. So I've turned out a lot of these things in different formats. Now I'll talk a little bit about full hull models. This is the William H. Connor was a vessel built in 1877 in Searsport, Maine. I was commissioned to build a full hull rigged model of this vessel by a man who was descended from owners and captains of this vessel. So the primary document for building this model was the builder's half model. You can see it's made up of layers of wood and held together with tenons, just like the one you saw expanded on the previous slide. And this model is about 6.5 feet long. It's really big. And rather than take it apart, because it's a museum object now, the first step in using this to build a model is to take the lines off the model and convert them into a what's called a lines plan of the ship, which is what you see at the bottom. There are 3 or 4 very good ways to do this, which I can't take the time to tell you about tonight, but it's a gratifying process when it works. And this is doing original historical work by converting this 3-dimensional document into a plan that can be used by anybody to reproduce this ship, either as a model or as a full-size vessel if they wanted to. The other sources I used for this model were primarily photographs. Built in 1877, there were 4 photographs known taken of this vessel. This one, there were mostly 4x5 glass plate negatives. And the one you see here, they're owned in the Peabody Essex Museum, by the way. And the one you see up above is taken later in the vessel's life when she was done being a sailing vessel and was being unrigged for future duty. And the value in a photograph like this is that if it was taken by a reputable photographer, you can dive into this picture incredibly deeply and richly. And the view on the right is an enlargement of just the rectangle in the picture. And you can see just about everything, how everything in that rigging and those masts and yards and everything, how they're put together, how they're what configured, the sizes of everything, even in some cases, the actual bits of hardware that join things together are visible in a photograph like this. Working from photographs is tremendously rewarding when they're good. In the lower left, you see a painting. There were 4 or 5 paintings made of William H. Connor, 4 during her life by people who saw her. Paintings are not reliable to take measurements from for the purpose of model building, but they do provide hard information about the color schemes of vessels and about the arrangement of things, even if they're not scaled exactly right. Many paintings were done by port painters in faraway places. This one was done in Hong Kong, and William H. Connor traded between the American Northeast and the East Coast of Asia, and she had her portrait painted there a couple of times. For the captain would have it done and bring the painting home to the owners. So there were also other documents, but these were the principal ones used in building the model. And here's the model that I built from that information. The hull is about 32 or 34 inches long. It's 3/16 of an inch to the foot scale. The materials used in it are Honduras mahogany for the bottom below the waterline. The rest of the painted wood is basswood or maple or pear wood. And the rigging is silk and linen, and the metallic parts are mostly brass. There's a little bit of gold leaf in the model, but not much. And the model now resides in California, and this was a private commission. Here's another model I built. This is done fairly recently. The scale of this is twice that of the previous one. This is 3/8 of an inch to the foot. The model's about 23 inches long, of a 72-foot long sloop yacht. This was a New York 50. It was designed and built by the Herreshoff Manufacturing Company in Bristol, Rhode Island. And to build models of Herreshoff yachts, which are tremendously popular and wonderful to do, is a whole different project in research, because you don't have to look very far for material to build models of Herreshoff vessels, because there are shop drawings from the manufacturing company for virtually every piece, every screw, nut, bolt, fitting, hinge, cabin fitting, deck house, mast, spar, turnbuckle. Everything that's in this vessel exists in shop drawings that are preserved at the Hart Nautical Collections at the MIT Museum. And all you have to be willing to do is to go there and pay for them. But they're all there. It's just wonderful. So this is a model. I built everything on this model, and all the blocks and all the turnbuckles and everything like that work. And the compass in the binnacle does not actually work, sorry. But otherwise it does. And that's a different kind of vessel than the previous, but an equally challenging project. Uh-oh. Now I'll talk a little bit about the repair work that I do. Ship model repair is an altogether different process from building. And the reason is that I'm not dictating what the model. The work that I do is not dictated by the client or by me and what I would like or what the client would like. The work is dictated by what the model needs. The goal of doing repair work is not to correct a model to be more like a vessel. In other words, saying that the original model builder might have made things wrong or didn't include things or painted things the wrong color or included too many things or had anachronisms and things like that. The goal is not to correct a model, but to reinvigorate the original model builder's intent. And this is a huge thing to pay attention to. The difficult thing here is that it forces me outside of my comfort zone. I'm occasionally asked to work on models that are made out of materials with which I have zero experience. And but remember, I always say yes. So I get sucked into that. I allow myself to be sucked into this, and that's what happens. And usually the stories end happily. I want to say one thing about repair work, about the word repair. An awful lot of model builders say they do model ship restoration. To the academically trained conservator, which, by the way, I do conservation work. Conservators will allow me to say that I do conservation work, but I am not allowed to call myself a conservator. I'm not academically trained. I do not have a degree in conservation work. But I've worked with many conservators who have taught me their philosophies and approaches to how objects are treated. And conservators have an extremely narrow meaning for the word restore. That meaning, very basically, is nothing is done to a piece that is not dictated by the piece itself. In other words, the person who's working on the piece, the conservator, has to check his or her own ego at the door and only listen to the object in front of them and not put their own ideas into the model. This is sometimes very hard to do. This is why I stay away from the word restore. I don't do restoration generally, unless the model, unless the piece says, this is the way I was, please restore me to that. But basically, I call it repair work. We'll look at a few examples of projects that I've done, major repair work projects. This is a model of a big model of a big vessel called Vulcanissa. Vulcanissa was built in 1717. She was a merchant trading ship, even though she was perforated for many guns. She had to be self-preserving because she operated in dangerous waters, but she was a merchant ship. She was a Dutch merchant ship working for the Dutch East India Company. The model is believed to date also from 1717. There's no reason to believe otherwise. And this was a phenomenal project. This model is owned by the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And when it was collected in New York by a collector in the late 19 teens or early 20s, and it came to the MFA in the 1930s. When it arrived at the MFA, it was an unrigged model with no masting or anything, except there was this bundle of spars and masts that you see down in the lower right, and included what's in the model there. And they looked forward to someday thinking that they could just take all those things and re-rig the model as if it was a kit. And I had been working on models at the Museum of Fine Arts, and one day the curator, the head of the department there, said, "Rob, would you like to rig the Dutch model?" And I said, "Yes." And I had no idea how deep that water was. And because I initially thought, oh, all I have to do is take these parts and put them together, and I have a model. Well, I made 2 trips to the Netherlands to do research on this, and it taught me that I was suffering from a really bad case of cultural astigmatism. We in the American Northeast have learned our maritime tradition, thinking that as a British tradition, because we were, after all, British colonies. Our early shipbuilders were British. They built ships in the British style. And from, I don't know, for 30 years or more, I had thought that if a ship wasn't built the way the Brits built it, it wasn't any good. Until you go to a country like the Netherlands and find out that they had as big or bigger maritime empire than the Brits did, and maybe not as big a navy, but certainly as big a commercial empire. And they built ships by the hundreds that were every bit as good as the British ships, and yet very different. And so I was introduced to this idea that there are many ways to skin a cat, and it was really, this project was really worth it just for that, other than the fact it got to be the Netherlands a couple of times and it was really good. So we'll look at a couple of things on this. I'm going to give you one example of what happened to this model. Nobody knows where this model was from the end of the Dutch East India Company's career or life from about 1800 till the early 20th century. So there's 100 years missing. But we came to believe that the model had been acquired by somebody who wanted to turn this very Dutch model into a model of an English ship, an English model. So here's an example that's easy to understand. On the left, there's a black and white photograph that shows the top of a mast, and there's rigging on the top of the mast that's covered with a canvas coat or boot. And the top of the mast, you can see, is square in section. And British mastheads are square in section at this time, and generally were. And we took that boot off, and we discovered that underneath the boot, the mast was round. You can see that in the center photograph. The rigging is going around a round mast that has been made square above that where the rigging is, and then covered with the boot to hide the evidence that they did. No maritime tradition ever covered hemp rigging with canvas boots. It never happened. Why? Because it would trap moisture that would cause fiber rigging to rot. So a model builder put that boot on there to hide the fact that they had changed the nature of this model. There were several dozen examples of this sort of thing on this model, but this was the one that's most easily shown to you. Part of this project was this was a model, it was a plank-on frame model. It had a fully detailed interior structurally, and I became fascinated with it and decided to record the interior structure of the model. So in the bottom here, you see a portion of a drawing that was created by looking inside the model with mirrors and flashlights and measuring probes to make a measured drawing of the interior of the model. The upper right-hand photograph shows the model when I was done with it, and understanding that the only thing on this model that came with it was this basic black platform around here and the mast that you see in the background here. It turns out that all of those spars that were in the bundle all had British characteristics on them. They were never on this model originally. So I had to remake all of the blocks, all of the deadeyes, all of the hardware, all of the yards except the 3 lower masts and the bowsprit. I even made all of the rigging line on here, twisting it all up from raw linen thread into different sizes and lays of appropriately sized lines, and using to rig this model 18th century Dutch rigging guides, which were, guess what, in Dutch. So the project also taught me how to read a good bit of technical nautical Dutch. Here's the model finished today on the left. It's taller than I am if I'm standing next to it. And on the right, you see it installed in its gallery at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And you can see how big it is. It's the white bottom picture. This picture's from the New York Times. Here's another example that is familiar probably, hopefully, to all of you. This is the model of Dreadnought that's in the Custom House that was mentioned earlier tonight. And the ship was built by Currier and Townsend in 1853 and became one of Newburyport's more famous vessel. While I was working on this talk, I happened to come across the photograph in the lower right, which shows Dreadnought, the vessel most in the foreground here, tied up at the pier in South Street in New York in 1865. This model was built by Henry G. Currier, who lived on South Pond Street, around the corner from where I live on Marlborough. And the model was in sort of disarray. It wasn't in terrible condition. But earlier this winter, this past winter, despite COVID, went into the museum and worked on the model. You can see that steering gear is sort of in disarray. Here's the picture that was in the paper. And here's my workspace in the upper main gallery at the museum. And it was a pleasure to work on this model. I'd been familiar with it since I moved here about 35 years ago. So I was happy to be able to put it to rights and to give it a cleaning, which it needed. Here's another way different subject. This is another 5-foot-long model of a First World War era British light cruiser that was had an interesting career. And this model was made. This was a fascinating project because the model was built by a known master model builder, British guy named Norman O-U-G-H, who was an extremely prolific model builder in the mid 20th century. He was worked under very adverse conditions, but he built these models that had incredible visual texture, incredible detail. This model was originally fitted with a steam-powered turbine engine that he built. And it had other features. The guns, the principal guns elevate. They have openable breeches and independent projectiles that go in and out. And you can, and when it came, I don't have a picture of it when it was disassembled, but I took it completely apart, level by level, piece by piece. And many of the smaller details are in the box in the upper right, that just show every one of those components had to be finished and relocated on the model. So this was a wonderful experience. Oh, I didn't mention that the model is unique. It's made out of steel. It was made out of steel food cans, tins. Steel had been tinned, and the builder took food cans, flattened them, hammered them, cut them, soldered them together, and ended up with something like this. It's a remarkable model. And it was this model's belonged to a big collection in Colorado that I worked on for a little over 2 decades, traveling out there to work on models. The last example in my talk is this model of Princess Royal. This is another model that was collected in New York in the 19 teens and 20s by a man named H.H. Rogers, who put together a collection of, 50 or 60 of these incredibly elegant British dockyard or admiralty models that are the epitome of formal ship model building. There's nothing casual about this model. This model was built in 1773 alongside the vessel as it was being constructed. It's 1/4 of an inch to the foot scale, and it's also about 4.5 feet long. It's a good size. It is made out of, it's wooden, and it had become dimensionally unstable. And I was asked by the United States Naval Academy Museum to take the model apart and put it back together again before it fell apart and the order of pieces was lost. So that was my commission, and that's what I did. It took about 18 months full time to work on to rebuild this model. It was a terrific experience. And the thing I want to point out here is that the model, this is a model that was clearly not built by an individual. We look at ship model building these days and think, oh, this model was built by so-and-so, by Norman O., the previous model, or by me, or by somebody else. And we think of it as a solitary thing. But these models were not. They were built by a team. You look at the three pictures in the lower right, a wooden sculpture that is part of the figurehead, an ebony lantern that's from the stern of the model, and a beautiful little oil painting that's off from near the bow of the model. And each of these features was built by or created by a craftsman who had spent a lifetime working in that medium, wood or ivory or oil painting, who knew what he was about. He wasn't somebody who was just making pieces for a ship model. These guys were total pros. And the model itself, all the shippy parts, were probably built by a shipwright in the shipyard where the model was built. But all of these decorative things were added. And there's another example you can see way over on the left picture. There's filigree work if you can see in the very back of the model, white filigree work here. You can see a little bit of it in the broadside picture here. Everything on the outside of this model that's white is ivory. It's unbelievably beautiful. So we see that this is the work of a team. I'd like to see more models today built by teams, but it doesn't really happen all that much. We see model building as a solitary thing done each by a person. So that's now my talk, and this is the abject commercialism section of my talk. The project with the Vulcanus and the project with the Princess Royal models. The condition reports that I made to the museums that own those models were very, very thorough and ended up being books, standalone books, each one, that are published by Sea-Watch Books out in Oregon. They're available online from Sea-Watch. Don't look for them at Amazon. I don't think you'll find them there. But if you're looking, you can find my name with Sea-Watch. The Princess Royal thing down on the lower left, Eric Smith, a friend of mine, had the vision of making a time-lapse movie of the reconstruction of the Princess Royal model at my shop, and we did that. And it was a 6-minute film that we submitted to the Newburyport Documentary Film Festival in 2009, where it was screened. And we're honored and pleased that that happened. And that video is available as a DVD with the book, if you happen to be interested in that. And that is what I have got to say. Thank you very much. It's been fun to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. I always feel like I learn so much from you. You always have some fascinating stories and sort of some insights into it. I have been monitoring the chat a little bit. If you'd like to stop sharing your screen, and I can invite everybody to turn on their video and their unmute if they'd like to ask a question. And as people are doing just that, I'm happy to field a couple questions that I took. One question was, what kind of advice can you give a casual observer when or what to look for when they're trying to make a purchase of a model? You know, often you go into these antique stores and you see something, and if you don't really know what you're looking at, but you don't know if it's something that's authentic, whether it's worth buying. Do you have any advice?
My first response is nobody's ever asked me that before. I thought I was going to tell you I could guess the questions, but that's a good one. I guess the advice that I would give sort of falls into two things. One, why do you want a boat model? Why do you want a ship model? Do you just want it for decor and to fill up a space, and you're happy with it, and you don't need it to represent a particular vessel that means anything to you? You just want something pretty? Then it doesn't really matter. There are a lot of different kinds of models. You see something you love. If you don't love it, don't buy it. But if you look at it and you love it, sure, it's interesting to you. If you are looking for fine scale models and you don't know how to look at a model, the advice that I would give is goes back to one of the early slides that says, does that model give a compelling impression of an actual vessel? Can you imagine yourself walking around on the deck of that vessel, of that model in miniature, and things being operable and grabbable and usable by you if you were the scale of the model? Are ropes the size that you could easily grab? Does gear look like it would work? Stuff like that. Is it credible? There are more technical answers that have to do with anachronisms and things like that that might be more difficult for a casual observer to answer. But that would be the two things. Don't get a model if you don't love it, and if you're looking for the fine scale thing and you don't know how to look at it otherwise, does it look like you could walk on its deck and it would work for you as a thing?
Mm-hmm. So that sort of ties into your first slide, which was basically the invitation to come in and explore. So
sure.
If it doesn't grab you to explore, don't bother spending the money, because you're going to want to be able to enjoy it. I don't know if there's anybody else that would like to ask a question. Again, you're welcome to turn on your video and your audio.
Rob, I actually had a question for you.
Okay.
You've built models of different cultural origins. do you have a particular preference in design for particular ship models? Do you like English style shipbuilding or Dutch or French? And what about, if you do have a preference, what about it is why?
Well, I sort of tried to answer that in the talk. If I'm left to my own devices to build a model, I would probably choose something that was American, that is built in the American Northeast here, because this is where I can find subject matter where I can contribute to the historical record by creating models of vessels that haven't been modeled before and that are certainly worthy of being modeled. And the, 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 the first slide you saw that showed the stern of a vessel named Sulu was a case in point. That vessel had never been modeled before, as far as we know. The original half model of it was extant at the Peabody Essex Museum. There are 4 or 5 photographs of that vessel. There's one painting of it, it's a primitive painting, but there is a painting of it. It had there are logbooks from it, and there are journals kept aboard it, that all of which contributed to being able to make a nice, a compelling impression of that vessel for the client, who initially wanted a model of Flying Cloud. And I said, no, do something. If you really want to contribute, let's contribute something new. And that suited me just fine. I'm currently working on a vessel built here in Newburyport. I've always wanted to focus on a vessel typical of Newburyport. Of the thousands that were built here on the Lower Merrimack River in the early part of the 19th century, that do not include the big downeasters or what we call, some people call clipper ships, that were built here, later. And I'm working on one that was built in 1830, where there's quite a bit of resource material available. And it's been a fascinating project that so far is two-dimensional, and hopefully will be a model someday. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Rob, I'm trying to figure out how to use Zoom.
There you are.
I'm coming in from Salem, and it's been a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering how far booked ahead are you? How many projects are you working on?
Okay. Well, I'm not booked that far ahead. If I've sort of slowed down because I'm getting on, right? And I
Join the club.
Yeah, I won't be able to retire, but I have slowed down, and my current backlog of actual commissions, I think, would keep me busy. What is it? The beginning of November, into next year, probably into, I don't know, February or March or April next year. Let me put it this way, though. I have been self-employed at doing this for 47 years, and I have never not had a backlog. I have never had a moment when I didn't have something I had to do for somebody. So my backlog is always there. Sometimes it's stretched out pretty far. Right now it's stretched out a few months. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, of course, one would be curious to know. I mean, it seems like you're spending hundreds of hours on a project like some of these, and I'd be curious to know about cost. But of course, that's kind of gauche to speak about. But I mean,
could have listened to
I mean,
this
I
concert.
unless you have a system where you have uh, blocks, that are ready made, and you can once for certain types of ships, I suppose there are typical types of equipment that you don't have to build individually, but or you can build them in multiples, or
I don't have, despite the fact that I build fine scale ship models, I don't have much economy in scale from doing that. However,
semi-automatic.
Tim went away. I'm still answering
did
Tim's
I go
question.
away?
Well, you went. I have you on the little thing, but not the big thing. So
Uh,
at any rate, I'll continue to answer your question. I've just had a memory lapse. Could you?
Well, let me just ask you
Here you are.
straight off. If I wanted to commission you to build a Newburyport mid-19th century ship from Currier and Townsend, what kind of a project? What would it cost to realize something of your quality?
Well, it's going to cost quite a bit, and it could cost. I mean, I'm hesitant to put numbers out live because then I get held to them later, which is risky. But it would, it would cost a lot.
Yeah. Well,
It's
you
not.
have to live.
Yes, I do, and I think I charge less than some model builders. I think but I have certain economies that I work to. But yeah, it gets up there.
I would say that it's really truly a calling and a real labor. It isn't about the putting out. I mean, I was surprised at your number of how many you've done. I do want to just bring in one nice compliment that I see here from Ben Hersing. Great thanks to you for bringing new, fresh life back into the Vulcanese model. I definitely want to see that at the MFA. I think that we will all look at models very differently than what we've seen in the past. And I just also wanted to say that there was another question as to, like, I think you've answered it a little bit, but is there a particular model that you would just die to have your hands on if you were given the opportunity? Or do you feel like you don't necessarily have that level of calling and you just take and always are saying yes to projects?
Are you, I've been really, really fortunate to to have been asked to work on some really, really spectacular ship models.
Mhm.
And one that I don't think I included it this evening is a model called Princess Royal, which is a British dockyard model that was built. Did I talk about that? No, you saw examples from it, but I didn't actually talk about it. And the I am sorry. Could you restate your question?
Well, I think you've sort of answered it. Is that you have sometimes certain models that are you're more drawn to. So I was just asking, is there a particular model that, in your mind, you would love to get your hands on to repair or work on?
I've been asked to repair some really, really spectacular models,
Mhm.
and the Princess Royal at the Naval Academy Museum. It was an astonishing thing to work on. But I mean, there are some pretty good models at the Custom House Museum that have been interesting to work on as well. So yeah,
Mhm.
am I coming close to answering your question?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was one of the questions in the chat room, and I think that, the real takeaway for me is that, you have a passion and you really have obviously a skill. And it's been really an interesting conversation, hearing a little bit more about your background and how you got to being in this area. So I don't know if there's any other questions. I haven't seen anything new posted in the chat. Just many thanks of very interested, great talent, and lots of thanks.
I would love to just ask a question. Hey, Rob, it's Maria and Mike.
Hey, Maria.
How are you?
Good.
We're blessed to have one of Rob's half model hulls in our home, the Pocahontas.
Mhm.
And one of the questions we have for you, Rob, is there anyone you're mentoring with your wonderful gift that you have?
Not specifically. I belong to a couple of different ship model clubs, and I certainly participate in those clubs actively. There's one or two. There's a club here, and I belong to a club in Boston, and I participate with those groups as much as I can, and that helps share things. Is that answering your question at all?
It does. It does. It was such a fascinating night. Thank you so much for all you do. You have such a beautiful gift. And again, we're blessed that we have a piece of, your gift here in our home that we treasure. Thank you.
Other people?
Anybody else for last minute question? I know we've gone a little bit over time, but it's been really fascinating despite a few little hiccups here in the beginning of the show. But we will have this recorded and be on our YouTube channel. And hopefully the recording will have those adjustments made. So thank you all for everyone's patience and tuning in tonight. And thank you very, very much, Rob, for not only all you do, but just reminding us all about how special these objects are in the collections of museums and private individuals.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to do it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. Yep.
Yep.
Bye.
Okay. Good night, all. Stay safe.
Night.